The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a sleek stainless steel box lined with mirrored panels that caught the warm glow of the building's evening lights. Eleanor Grant stepped inside, her leather heels clicking against the polished floor as she glanced down at her phone, scrolling through the dozens of unread emails demanding her attention. As the CEO of Northline Industries, she was accustomed to living in a whirlwind of meetings, investor calls, and crises that needed her signature calm but firm resolve. She barely noticed the small boy already in the elevator, clutching a worn canvas backpack and staring up at the ceiling with wide, nervous eyes. Eleanor pressed the button for the top floor. The boy didn't move, but his eyes flickered toward her. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9, she thought, with a mop of brown hair that looked like it had been combed hastily and a pair of scuffed sneakers. When the doors began to slide shut, a man in overalls slipped in at the last second. One of the janitors. Eleanor vaguely recognized him from her occasional late-night walks through the building. His name badge read Louis. He looked tired, but his eyes softened when he glanced at the boy. The elevator began its smooth ascent. Eleanor continued scrolling, her mind on the quarterly report. Then, she heard the boy's voice, quiet but firm. "Don't talk." Eleanor's head snapped up. She blinked at him, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" The boy's dark eyes held hers, steady and urgent. "Don't talk," he repeated, almost in a whisper now, but with the kind of intensity that pierced through the buzz of her phone and the hum of the elevator motor. Luis, the janitor, stiffened and looked down at his son. "Mateo, a broken bar," he warned softly. But Mateo shook his head slightly. His small fingers clenched the straps of his backpack. Eleanor frowned but stayed silent. Something about the child's tone, the tremor in it, the strange certainty, made her comply. She lowered her phone slowly, setting it in her bag. She could hear her own heart beating now. The elevator climbed, the digital numbers blinking. But then, with a sudden lurch, it stopped between floors. The lights flickered and dimmed. Eleanor grabbed the rail, startled. Luis muttered under his breath in Spanish, his hands going to the panel of buttons. He pressed open door several times, but nothing happened. Eleanor's mind began racing. A maintenance issues, electrical fault. She'd have her facilities manager fired first thing in the morning. But before she could speak, Mateo whispered again, barely audible, "It's not broken." "Not really." Eleanor stared at him. "What do you mean?" The boy's eyes welled with tears. "You're not supposed to talk. If you're quiet, it won't find you." Luis knelt down, holding Mateo's shoulders. "My Joe, what are you?" But Mateo clapped his small hand over his father's mouth. The janitor froze, glancing nervously at Eleanor, as though embarrassed. And then Eleanor heard a faint scraping sound from above the elevator, followed by a dull metallic clang. Her stomach dropped. She glanced up at the ceiling panel. There was nothing visible but the usual vents and a maintenance hatch. But the sound, like nails dragging against metal, came again. Luis pulled Mateo closer. "Say A tilde plus minus or R Grant," he whispered urgently. "Please, broken bar, just do what he says." For a moment, Eleanor almost laughed at the absurdity. She was Eleanor Grant, one of the most powerful businesswomen in the country, sitting in a stuck elevator with the janitor and his child, being told not to talk because of some invisible threat. And yet the scraping grew louder. She swallowed her words. Time stretched. 5 minutes, maybe 10. The elevator hung suspended, the walls feeling smaller and smaller. Eleanor noticed Mateo was trembling but keeping his chin up. He whispered to his father in Spanish, words Eleanor couldn't catch. Luis met her eyes. "My son, a broken bar. He has dreams. He sees things before they happen. Sometimes he's wrong, but sometimes a broken bar." He trailed off, glancing up at the ceiling. Another clang. Eleanor's hands were clammy now. She thought of her own son who offered college, too busy to text her back. She thought of how rarely she'd been still like this, forced to listen to something beyond her control. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the scraping stopped. The elevator jolted once and began moving again. The lights brightened. Eleanor exhaled, realizing only then that she'd been holding her breath. The doors opened on the top floor. The boy released his grip on his father's hand, but his eyes stayed on Eleanor. "I'm sorry," Mateo said softly. "It wasn't after you. But if you'd talked, it would have heard." Luis shot him a warning glance but said nothing. He ushered Mateo out quickly, nodding politely at Eleanor before disappearing down the hall toward the maintenance stairwell. Eleanor stood frozen. Her legs felt weak. She walked slowly toward her office, her mind reeling. She could dismiss it as a coincidence, a power failure, a child's imagination. But something about Matteo's eyes, so wide, earnest, frightened, lodged itself in her chest. That night, she stayed late in her office, unable to concentrate. She found herself looking up the janitorial schedule, something she'd never bothered with before. Luis. Full name, Luis Ramirez. Employee for 7 years. Single father. Works nights. She stared at the file. The next day, she called for Luis and Matteo to come to her office. She had meant it as a routine check-in, maybe a chance to put the whole strange incident behind her. But when they arrived, she saw the boy's shy posture and his father's worn uniform, and something shifted inside her. They sat down across from her massive mahogany desk. "I wanted to thank you," she said slowly. "Yesterday was a broken bar, unusual. But your son kept us calm." Luis hesitated. "He just gets scared. Say A tilde plus minus or R." "He didn't mean a." "No," Eleanor interrupted softly. "I think he did mean it." She looked at Matteo. "Why did you say that yesterday?" Matteo fidgeted. "Because I knew something bad was in the elevator. It's like a broken bar. Sometimes I feel things. If people are quiet, it goes away faster." Eleanor didn't know what to say. She had built her career on data, numbers, and strategy, not intuition and unseen dangers. Yet here was this boy, speaking as though the world had layers she couldn't perceive. Instead of dismissing him, she asked gently about his life. Matteo's face brightened as he talked about his love of drawing, about the small apartment they shared with his grandmother, about how his father worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. Luis tried to hush him, embarrassed, but Eleanor kept listening. Over the following weeks, Eleanor found reasons to visit the lower floors, to chat with Luis, to ask Matteo about school. She told herself it was curiosity, but in truth, something about that elevator moment had cracked her shell. She began to see her building as the people who cleaned it, fixed it, kept it running, and not as background but as lives as vivid as her own. One evening, as she was leaving late again, she found Matteo sitting on the bench near the lobby, sketching with a stubby pencil. She sat beside him, surprising herself. "What are you drawing?" "A tree," he said simply, showing her the page. It was a rough but beautiful rendering of an old oak, roots sprawling deep into the ground. "It's lovely," she said. And she meant it. He hesitated, then said, "The tree's roots go everywhere, even under the elevator. That's why it's safe now." She blinked at him, unsure what he meant, but nodded anyway. "That's good." He glanced up at her. "You're different now." She laughed softly. "Am I?" "You look at people," he said. "Before you only looked at your phone." The words landed like a stone in her chest. She reached out and touched his shoulder gently. "Thank you for saying that." Days turned into weeks. Eleanor began small changes: so healthcare benefits extended to janitorial staff, scholarships for employees' children, better safety inspections of the building. She didn't announce these changes with press releases or tweets. She just did them, quietly. Then one rainy afternoon, another elevator incident occurred, and not with Eleanor, but with a group of interns. This time, the maintenance team caught the problem early. No one was hurt. But Eleanor found herself thinking of Matteo's warning again. She wondered if the thing he sensed was real, or a metaphor, or some psychic intuition about human danger. She didn't know. All she knew was that she trusted him. Months later, at the company's annual awards banquet, Eleanor asked Luis and Matteo to sit at the head table as her guests. The room full of executives and investors blinked in surprise at the janitor and his son sitting among them. Eleanor introduced Luis as someone who has kept this building safe and clean for 7 years, and Matteo as a boy who reminded me of what courage looks like. As applause filled the room, Eleanor felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Not pride, but connection. Afterward, Matteo tugged at her sleeve. "It's gone now," he said softly. "What is?" she asked. "The thing in the elevator," he said. "It won't come back." She smiled faintly. "How do you know?" "Because you listened," he said. "It only comes when people forget to listen." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She knelt down to his level, her expensive gown pooling on the floor. "Thank you," she whispered. Luis watched, speechless, his rough hands clutching his hat. That night, Eleanor returned to her office and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. She thought of all the decisions she had made, the deals, the profits, the headlines. None of it felt as real as the moment in the elevator when a child's voice told her not to talk. She realized then that kindness was not a strategy, not a corporate initiative, but a quiet, stubborn choice. It was staying still and listening. It was looking at people instead of past them. And in that realization, she felt freer perhaps for the first time.